Hello, my friends and colleagues. This is Jen Lemaster again, talking to you a little bit about equity in the classroom, whether it is online, blended, or in person. And quite a bit of what I'm going to talk about today is coming from this book, which hopefully you can see. This is the work of Zaretta Hammond and her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And quite a bit of this information has been part of your uploaded reading that you can find in your folder. And I just thought I would talk us through some of the highlights, particularly the intersections between culturally responsive teaching and Jesuit education. So I actually wrote a master's degree on this, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart, and thus some of the formalities. But briefly, remember what culturally responsive teaching is. It's originated by Geneva Gay, and she talked about using how we use cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conduits for teaching them more effectively. In Jesuit speak, we would just say this is knowing the context of our students, who they are, where they are from, where their families are from, and how all of those pieces that make this child in front of us, them, and whole, are all parts that we need to be cognizant of as we go into the classroom. And that is the same regardless of whether we are face-to-face, we are in a blended situation, or we are fully online. This is how we get to know the students in front of us in order to better serve them. So as time moved on, Gay's research has sort of morphed into taking some of these ideas of culture and looking at how our brain, and in brain science, how it actually intersects. And it's really quite remarkable seeing the breadth and the intersectionality of these two ideas. So the idea here with Gay, and you can see it on the slide, is there's 5 essential elements. There's a knowledge base about cultural diversity, creating curriculum, which illustrates the diversity of your school, so that what looks at Burbuck is going to look very different than possibly how McQuaid might look, or how Jesuit Tampa might look, or other places in the US and Canada. How we create this caring learning community, and communicating effectively in delivery of instruction. Now, obviously, there are whole books written about this, and there are whole dissertations and whole classes and whole degrees that you can get in this. So this is a very small snippet of some pieces that might be useful to you moving forward. So as Jesuit educators, there's quite a bit of intersection that I see between this idea of culturally responsive teaching and Jesuit education. Both are whole child approaches, that they don't isolate, that school happens in a bubble. It is all of who we are and what we are and all of that is around us. Active learning is particularly important in both areas, that students are doing things, they're building, they're creating, and they're really engaged wrestling with the material. And it is not just teacher directed out, it's actually an interaction, which fits very well into our Jesuit charism. Whereas CRTT will say they are growth mindset, in our Jesuit tradition, we're going to say that we are discovering and cultivating our gifts from God. Same idea. We are not static. We are always in relationship and growing. And we have our IPP, context, experience, reflection, use, into evaluation, if you like. And brain-based practices are going to tell us to ignite, to chew, and to review. And I'm going to talk about those in just a minute because it's remarkable how similar it is. So when we look at some of this research and how do we build this more equitable environment in our classrooms. So I'm not talking systemic equity here. I am talking just what you and I can do in our classrooms to make it a more equitable environment for all of our students. The number one thing is we have to build these authentic relationships. And there are lots of other areas that we've been discussing this along the way during this workshop. And these 3 weeks, wherever you're watching this video in, we have to be our authentic selves. We have to be willing to accept the authentic reality of the students on the other side of the camera or in front of us, or both situations. Students need to trust us. They need to feel that we have their back. They need to feel that we have their best interest at heart, because our brains are going to respond more positively to those who we feel are behind us. If we feel that a teacher, that an administrator, or anyone else in our world does not have our best interest at heart, our brains, in a sense, are going to shut them down. And no matter how much lip service we're giving it, it's not going into longer term memory. We want that deeper learning. And the first step in deeper learning is trust and authentic relationships. So we need to acknowledge, particularly acknowledge in this time period, our students' stress response. We are having a stress response too. So this is almost this kind of education, I would say, is fraught with all kinds of challenges. Because again, when our brain is under chronic stress, the research starts telling us that what we have in front of us, all of our energy in our chemical energy in our brain, is for survival. And right now, that's where the energy is going. And it's going for our students, and it's going for us, because we are under a chronic stressful environment. If we are adding stress because of grades, because of inordinate amounts of work that we are asking the students to do, even adding stress because a student is not comfortable with what's behind them in their workspace, or they're not comfortable in what their house looks like, what they look like. This is all compounding stress. And at that point, our chemical systems are not open and receptive to new knowledge. It's too busy trying to survive. So we have to that's just not going to happen. Minimize stress. So some different ways that we could do that in very simple ways in this kind of instruction. Don't make the kids turn their cameras on. You might want to do it for attendance, or you have a system in place where you say, okay, for the first 5 minutes, we're going to be somewhere safe. Let them know that every time in class they might be on camera, because then they are in charge of the image that you see. Otherwise, let them turn them off. They're there. Some of you are turning off your cameras right now. It's okay. We don't need to constantly be on and constantly feel like we are being watched. Give the students control over when and how they turn on those cameras. Other ways we can lower stress. I keep wanting to say eliminate, and we just can't. We have to be more flexible in our policies on work, turning things in. First, make it very predictable. Students know exactly where to turn in the work. Every time an assignment is due, I upload it into Google Classroom. Every time an assignment is due, I upload it into my PowerSchool school page. Every time an assignment is due, I email it to my teacher. Whatever your policy is, it is consistent and it is supportive, and the student knows exactly what he or she is doing in order to get the assignment, turn it back in. How else do we do student stress? And our own stress. Quick formative assessments. Stop trying to do the big, huge summative assessment. It stresses us out because we have to grade it. It stresses students out because so much is writing on it. It continues to stress students out because it takes time to grade it. So there's not that immediate feedback. So those formative assessments, those quick assessments where student can do 15 minutes worth of work to show you that they have mastered a concept, you can look it over, give them some quick feedback, say, yeah, you got it, and everybody moves on. And there's that supportive, it's predictable, I get the feedback quickly, and I feel loved, authentic, and so I'm more open to it. You get it? It's all starting to spin out. Ritual, recitation, repetition, all of that. Repetition is a Jesuit term as well. Repeat, repeat, repeat. We are in a stressed, chronic stressed environment. It is not a young person's fault that they forgot that those math problems were due today. It is not my fault that I forgot to email my principal back. We forget things because our brains are working so hard right now. Repetition, ritual, it's always the same. I always turn things in at this time. And then finally, finding ways to collaborate and connect. You've been looking at all kinds of these different tools, and we really want students to still work with material, with each other. That might be making small groups in Zoom and giving students some time together to discuss a poem that they read on the Harlem Renaissance. That could be a lab that the students do in person during a blended environment and then work on the lab report virtually the next day. That could be a discussion forum in whatever learning management system you have. So we have watched a film and we have compared it to the piece. So we watched The Great Gatsby, we have read The Great Gatsby, and now we're starting to bring in some of what the images of the filmmaker versus the words of the author and how they start interplaying and whether we find that they're a good connection or not. Whatever it is, they rely on each other. They're constructing knowledge together. They're trusting you as the teacher to allow them to work with things. You can trust them as well. It creates intellectual safety. So here are a bunch of links, and this PowerPoint you saw is uploaded into the file. If you would like to read some books that we used at Brebeuf in our PLC work this past year, all on this idea of culturally responsive teaching, brain-based science, how it all comes together into this whole child view that fits so well in our Jesuit schools. Okay, typically you would ask students to do a brain break. I'll get into this more, but what's interesting is our brains, at best, can handle learning new content for about 12 minutes. Not quite sure where I am right now, but I feel like I'm getting about that point. So we got to take a little bit of a break. So if you want to pause here, and you can actually try this, moving your right foot in a clockwise circle while you've got your right pointer finger making the number 6 in the air. Trust me, do it for a couple minutes, pause, and then come back. Welcome back. I hope you found some enjoyment in that moment. Okay, so there's 3 elements to culturally responsive teaching in the brain that Dr. Hammond gets into that I really want to point out because these are critical in continuous learning environments. And it creates an environment that is engaging for all of our students, ignites their ideas, builds that culture of trust, and then all of the learning happens. Okay, so she talks about igniting things. So igniting is getting the brain interested in what's happening in the classroom environment. And that is, if you think about it, so you're sitting in a classroom, let's pretend we're actually in class. And I, as the student sitting in the room, I have to decide, am I paying attention to the air conditioner? Am I paying attention to the teacher? Am I paying attention to the lawnmower outside or the ambulance going down the street? Am I paying attention to the person next to me whose allergies are acting up? What am I paying attention to? So some things that you can use to ignite the brain into paying attention in any format is music, an engaging image like this one, something that sort of triggers, oh, this looks interesting. I think I'm going to pay attention to that. A video clip that we might play, a particularly moving prayer. All of these things. It even goes that step more. That's why bell ringers are so big in elementary school. And I would say use them in higher classes too. What is that trigger that triggers my brain into saying, oh, I'm in Mrs. Lemaster's newspaper class right now, and this is going to be super cool, and I'm going to pay attention. So think about those techniques you can do. All of these things work in blended environments: pictures, music, videos, prayers, having a student give a prayer or a reflection, not just diving into the review. Do a little bit something to really engage that brain, just a couple of minutes. Then the idea is you want to take small bits of information and chunk it together and give students time to chew it. So brain-based research shows that for high school students, the brain can focus for about 12 minutes. This pretty much goes for adults. It goes a little bit lower for younger children, about 8 minutes. Now that's when the brain is not in chronic stress. Right now the brains are in chronic stress, so I wouldn't even go past that 7-minute mark. Short mini lessons. I give you a little bit of information, then you're going to have some time to chew on it. Because whether we like it or not, our brains are wired to go about 12 minutes and then they're going to shut down for about 10, regardless of what we do. So why don't we use that? I'm not even going to say 12 minutes because we're all in chronic stress. 7 minutes for some direct instruction or introduction. And then that next 10 minutes is time for students to really chew with it. Maybe it's a silent reflection. Maybe it's writing a discussion forum post. Maybe in math, it's doing 2 or 3 sample problems to see how I'm doing with it. Maybe in science, it's taking some pipe cleaners and building the cell so I can sort of see it in 3 dimension. Then I can come back as a teacher, review what we all just did and talk about it, and then add on the content and then give some more time to chew. This chunk, chew, and you could even add in then a review. Oh my gosh, what an animation thing. How then do I as the student restate that learning content to you, the teacher? So one of the big things in equity and inclusion is using long non-linguistic representations. So if I can take some sort of content, say I've just been listening to a lecture of a battle during the American Revolution. Can I maybe draw it? Can I maybe write a poem about it? Can I maybe do a pictorial timeline where I can't use words, but I have to build that timeline somewhere? How else? Can I articulate it in my maybe own words? That's not non-linguistic, but that's another way. Can I repeat it back to you, teacher? Can I tell you it? How else can I work with that material to really show you? Again, these are formative. They can be very quick. Student choice, so it's very student-centric, so I can kind of get in and I can show you, student, can show you, teacher, where my gifts, my talents, my strengths are, which growth mindset, it shows me I can always grow. It shows you I can always grow. Everybody wins. Super fun. So I have talked quite a bit, and congratulations on taking some time with this today. There are more resources linked here for you. There are a whole bunch of work cited here for you. Also uploaded into the folder, which I hope you took a look at. These are sort of some differentiated strategies in different areas. So you can look at different ways to have content, different ways to process things, products, learning environments. What are all the different fun ways that we can build environments that are more equitable and inclusive for all of our students? This one I sort of thought was fun. I use this in my own classroom, or I'll ask my friend to go through my classroom work to do. What does a culturally responsive classroom look like? So if I walk through, and you can do a walkthrough online, you can do a walkthrough in a classroom. It does not matter. When I look at your teaching and learning environment, do I see these things? Do I hear these things? Do I notice that they're taking place and that the students are engaging in them? And I just found that they're not all perfect, but it was a really great way to concretely go through some things. And then finally, this is also in there, the foundational frameworks, this rigor and relevance. How do we build out in our application models as we are building up in our Bloom's taxonomy? All these resources are in the folder. Enjoy them. I hope you found this interesting, and I look forward to the next video that I'm going to make.